Clark is a lawyer, he could last stream. He's the first man to prove that water run upstream. That's why I like Mr. Clark. Yes, you know he is my friend. Say if I just stay out the grave, he'll see that I don't go to the pen.
Man, that's a good intro, but
I love it.
it's long. I mean, it's long, but I like to think that it gives everyone a chance to, you know, get in, get their popcorn, you know, get ready.
Get us ready to go.
Get us ready. How are you tonight, Lady C?
I'm good. I'm mellow right now. So I am really looking forward to having our guest on in a few moments here. Some really great information.
We have a guest tonight?
We do.
I thought we were just talking.
We can just talk.
Fishing's fun. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have a guest tonight, and we are really excited to have David Sikorski of the CCA Maryland. He is the executive director. He's a pretty smart dude, and he's going to tell us a lot of stuff that we need to know and give you guys a lot of opportunities to ask questions. Next week, we're also excited. If you haven't noticed, we've kind of branched out of our normal winter season. And when we found cool stuff to talk about, like the state of the striped bass with David Sikorski, we're kind of slotting these things in. Next week, we are going to talk about the Tangier Classic Fishing Tournament, which is an awesome tournament out of the, I guess, you know, southeastern Bay. But we're really excited to talk about that and all the awesome things. It's not just a fishing tournament. That tournament really benefits really serves a great benefit to a family of a youth that's not doing so well right now. So we're really excited to talk about all the great things that they're doing and talk about the updates for this year's tournament. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about our sponsors real quick. This episode is brought to you by Hook Optics, our friends at Hook Optics.
Yes.
Bob and Nikki. We love their product. We actually sold a pair to a local charter captain on the bay here the other day, and
we're selling glasses now. How about
we are selling glasses? And he put them on, and it looked like a little kid's face on Christmas. His face just lit up. He's like, sold. I want them. I mean, and like, there's a lot of nice glasses out there, but one of the things that really jumped out to me with these hooks is just the overall build quality. Like, I've owned a lot of the other brands, and I'm not going to trash any other brands. They're good quality brands, but the frame quality is just excellent. I'll put these up to the camera. These are the Bill Fishers in a matte gray.
They're very light. You can tell by the way you're handling the glasses that they're pretty light.
Yeah, very lightweight. For those of you guys that get headaches from wearing sunglasses, I've never gotten a headache from wearing my hooks. You got a pair that you wanted to showcase tonight, right?
So it's really hard to find women's glasses in a male-dominant industry, but Hook Optics actually looks out for us. So I have a pair of Marleys that I wear. These aviators are really nice. They actually, I think the frames come in different colors, but this one is gold. It's also very lightweight. I like that the women's glasses are multi-use, so I can wear them on the water and I can wear them with an outfit.
And they're contributing a really awesome prize that we'll get to in just a second. This shows the other sponsors we have are GI Jigs, Backyard Custom Rods, and BKD, all of which we feature in other shows, and all of which are fantastic products from really good people.
Yes.
Also, before we bring in the man of the hour, I wanted to show one last thing that we're really excited about. I've got on our initial Rockfish shirt.
Well, right? Shame on me.
I love this shirt. It's awesome. It's my favorite shirt to wear. But we also have a second one coming out, the Red Zone. So this is a fish to celebrate one of my favorite, but one of the greatest game fish that we have that really, occupies from all the way up to right about where we live. So we're right at the northern stretches of them. I got onto them last week, and the redfish goes all the way down to Texas. So a really great game fish that you've gotten to
Oh
catch
yeah,
many a time. You're like the
caught some
redfish Shaleya.
giants. It's amazing. It was beautiful. They're just beautiful fish, and they're almost like ancient of days. You pull them out and you're holding them, and it's just beautiful.
They're like 50 years old.
Yeah.
They're older than, they're like
Yeah.
30 years older than I am.
Yeah.
That's right, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So that shirt is available on thefishingchannel.net along with this one as well. But let's not hesitate any longer. We've had this poor guy just sitting here this whole time.
Oh, that's jibber jabber.
How you doing, David? How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you guys, and thanks for having me on tonight.
For sure. So there's a lot of people who tune in who aren't from this area. So I'd like to introduce you to them, if that's okay, and kind of name some accomplishments, if you don't mind, just to give the audience knowledge and awareness that the speaker we have tonight, he's credible in what we're going to be talking about today. The importance of the fishery, what's going on with striped bass, and projected future of the striped bass, and how it impacts not just the recreational fishery, but also the commercial fishery and other fish at large, which you'll probably explain in some of the assessments and reports that the CCA and many other organizations do to protect the resource and help the fish thrive.
Wow, well said.
That was a mouthful, yeah.
Absolutely.
That was from here. So, David, I was really interested to read about you because I did not know that you were a volunteer for the CCA for over a decade before you got hired. That's pretty impressive. Well, I'm not from this area.
Well, and absolutely. And there's, in fact, I'm sitting here, I was listening to your sponsors, and I think every single sponsor you mentioned is a CCA member. You know,
Right
Bob and Nikki at Hook. I saw them a couple weeks ago at the White Marlin Open. It was the first time I had a chance to put some glasses on my face, and I look forward to being a Hook glasses owner very soon. And actually, I have a history with the Pino family. Used to fish with Bill Pino a lot from Squid Nation, and I constantly get reminded how lucky I am to work on behalf of recreational anglers, because it's been such a great part of my life, and it's such a great community. You know, there's a ton of complexity out there, a ton of different ways to pursue the resource, but you know, working for CCA, we're an organization that represents recreational anglers and our interest in the sport, but not one specific interest. Just, you know, we try and elevate the resource first and make sure that we can educate people to make sure that they're empowered to get involved in public resource management. And only because I found some fantastic people in CCA just after college was I able to become a volunteer. And every step of the way, get motivated by my fellow volunteers, my fellow anglers, and realize that the mission and, you know, the outcomes and the work is so important, because fishing is just not only in our blood in Maryland, but it's just in our culture. And everybody here is just very fortunate to live on the banks of a national treasure, the Chesapeake Bay. So I pinch myself daily. This work is not easy. Managing a volunteer organization is not easy, but the people I'm doing it for, you know, they're my people, and I love that opportunity. And I mean, you can see the wall behind me. That's a life lived fishing as much as I can. So if I have to spend a lot of time at this desk to continue to, you know, focus on fishing for future generations, then that's what I'm going to do, and I'll do it as long as I can. So I do it because of the members that are around us now, and from a lot of people that came before us. So just happy to be part of it.
Right on.
Thank you for that.
That's beautiful.
And all the work you do, David. I will say that, you know, we've done our share of fishing outside of this region, and coming back to the Bay. I've said it numerous times, and, you know, I apologize to those of you that are tired of hearing me say it, but like coming back to this fishery, it is an amazing resource. It's a beautiful place. I remember, you know, we went 40 days down all the way to Florida and came back, and I only had an hour to fish, and I went over to Poplar Island and caught 10 rockfish over 20 inches. And I'm like, where could I go and do that? Like, you know, I think we take it for granted sometimes, and I know you don't, and I really appreciate all of the work that you do, not taking it for granted.
Right. And the work you do isn't just for Maryland, which we'll learn tonight and what you share. I mean, it impacts pretty much the entire East Coast. So really great work that you're doing. And not only were you a volunteer for over a decade, you were in a committee as a volunteer. So you weren't helping file paperwork, right? You were really in there. So that was really great work that you did, and it definitely reaped its rewards in where you're sitting today. I like to read this just for our audience. There goes my Brooklyn accent going.
Audience.
Audience. Because I think this is really important to know about you for people who don't know. So in early 2021, David was selected as a legislative proxy for the Atlantic State Marine Fishery Commission, which we will talk about tonight. For people who don't know, the interstate body that oversees the management of the migratory fish in the state waters along the Atlantic coast, like I was saying earlier. Prior to being selected for his role, David was a member of the ASMFC, Atlantic Menhaden, and Striped Bass advisory panels. Again, giving kudos to our speaker tonight and what we're going to be talking about. So I'm really excited with the wealth of knowledge that David has and the amount of experience. Not only the experience, though, you love fishing. So I think you're a good man to be on there.
Yeah, and it's experience around a lot of really knowledgeable people. So I say this a lot because I truly believe it. And I get the great opportunity to rub elbows with experts in all these different fields and all different sectors and backgrounds and states and regions and absorb. And that's what I learned in the advisory panel process. And I encourage people to step up and fill these roles. And we can talk more about the structure and how folks get involved. But the opportunity's there. And I was, when given an opportunity, prior to working for CCA, I was self-employed and, chose to wander around and fish and hunt as much as I could, but also commit to these meetings and better understand the process, because so few people can do it. And then even when they do, it's very easy to get jaded, to become cynical and realize that these political processes are difficult and easy to want to turn away from and actually spend time on the water instead of in a boardroom. So.
Sure.
We have people from, we mentioned that we were going to have people from other states. We've had, I think, 4 comments so far, and they're coming from 3 different states.
Right on.
So we have a guy, our buddy Eloy from Southwest Florida. What's going on, E? And my friend Lloyd, who lives in Virginia. And Short Sharp, where's he live?
Oh, Jiminy Crickets. I just sent him his stuff recently. Sorry.
Maryland, isn't he?
Oh, further out in Maryland, I believe. Yeah,
that's
right.
But we're going to be talking about a lot of things you can do to give back tonight. But
I'm excited.
We, everyone wants to get stuff. You want to get too, right?
Oh, there's stuff involved. Okay.
Yeah, there's
cool.
stuff involved.
Right on.
So for the best question, and David's going to choose this question tonight. For the question of the night, we are going to be giving away on our end. We've got a two-pronged, Maryland Eastern Shore. So we're representing 3 states already. For the best question of the night, we are going to be giving away a $100 gift certificate.
Big money.
That will go towards
Wow.
Hook Optics, or actually the glasses on my face, which I can no longer see anything.
Yes.
The glasses on my face come from an optical galleria, which they have stores in Easton, Centerville, and Ocean City.
Mm-hmm.
They're the same people that bring us Hook Optics. And $100, I mean, these are very nice sunglasses.
Wow.
And they come at a premium. But $100 will buy you a really good chunk of those glasses.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
they're really nice pair of glasses with $100 off.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That was really nice to see Bob and Nikki.
Yeah, thank you to Bob and Nikki for providing that prize for this evening. So it's $100 towards, Hook Optics or a pair of glasses that you might need. Awesome. And David, you have something on your end as well that you're contributing.
Yes, winner's choice, one of the 2 Under Armour CCA hats. So this one's a fake leather patch, the twisted fish, and then this one's has a little patch on it. And if you saw yesterday, so I heard you talking about redfish. Do you know that this is the redfish? The CCA twisted fish is a redfish.
Nice.
Oh, did not know that.
Yeah, we were originally founded in Texas, and some of our most important work we have ever done in the Gulf is stopping gillnet fisheries in inshore shallow waters and protecting the biomass of redfish and speckled trout, making them game fish. And so that's one of the reasons they thrive in the Gulf. And it's a big part of, work done in Florida as to why they thrive here in the Chesapeake, and we're enjoying them. So yesterday, there was a gentleman wearing this hat, one of these hats, that just set a pending fly record for a red drum. And I sent that message from Captain Tom Weaver that a lot of folks have probably seen by now, because I love giving the Southern boys a hard time in CCA and saying, look, our redfish are bigger. They're bigger and better. Come on up and pull on a real redfish.
They are. They just are.
Yep. So anyway, the fly, pending fly record holder, Paul Heinold, was wearing this hat that he won through a different CCA event. So, hey, I think this one's good luck, but you get to choose one, and that'll be shipped out to you by our friends at Tide Outfitters.
Awesome. That's a great gift. I love my CCA hat. I've worn it a lot.
Oh, my CCA hat is broken in.
It's multi-use. Yeah.
It is annihilated at this point. Like it's all folded in.
We'll get you another one when you're ready. You can have one of these too.
I don't know if I
think
put mine.
He fished that one and he got you in there.
I put mine. I know that. That was so easy. I came into this saying I wanted another hat.
I'll take it.
But so, question of the night.
Yes.
Sikorski's choosing the winner, and you're going to get a $100 gift certificate and the choice of your Under Armour hat. So stay tuned, because if you really want your choice and not whatever we pick for you, you're going to have to be around at the end to choose it, right? All right. So,
you ready to get into questions?
yeah, he said something about redfish, and we can talk, until the sun comes up about, that work that has been done for speckled trout and redfish, and how that work has been mimicked all from Texas all the way up here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why we have such a good redfish fishery almost everywhere. But there's a lot that goes into that. And a lot of different organizations are working together for the common good of these fish that we love so much. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a simple, rundown of how all this comes together by, creating government guidelines, state regulations?
Yeah, federal, the police. There's so many entities involved in what you do. I don't know how everything is kept straight.
Yeah. So not only to protect the fish, but to help them thrive. How does that all work?
Yeah. So, it all comes down to the point that these creatures are a public resource. They belong to all of us. I like to say that it's most important that we remember they belong to the future. And ultimately, we have government officials that manage public resources. It's been a part of our country for a long time, under the concept called the public trust doctrine. And we entrust our public officials to manage these things which are public. And it's not just resources, right? It's all these things that government manages. And so ultimately, there's authority, and it's the stuff we learn in history or civics and such, growing up, social studies. The different pieces of the government and the balance of power that exists directly connects to fisheries. And through history, there's been opportunities where, because these fish migrate, like you said, redfish from Texas, even as far as New York, in history, they've been noted. And then take the striped bass, the Atlantic striped bass, the migratory population is really like a North Carolina through Maine species, now spilling over into Canada. So you have these jurisdictions, these states that have sovereignty over their state waters. On the Atlantic coast, it's out to 3 miles, and then inland to the tidal water line. And ultimately, a series of compacts and agreements and laws have been passed along the way that have led to commissions being created on a state level. And that's like the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission that I'm honored to serve on. And as you mentioned in the entry, I'm a legislative appointee. And so the way the structure works is each state on the Atlantic coast, from Maine to Florida, has representation that comes from their executive branch through their governor's office. Governors select an appointee to serve. The legislative branch has an appointee that is a legislator, which is selected. And then quite often, just like in my position, that legislator, because they have lots going on, to serve the people at large, they identify people that are that they trust will carry their interest at the table at ASMFC and represent the people and take a an approach that they appreciate. And in Maryland, we're lucky to have a legislator that is focused on conservation and entrusts me. And actually, I share the seat with Dr. Allison Colden from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. So she's an absolute rock star of fisheries. I mean, literally, Dr. Colden, an oyster scientist. She actually sits on the Menhaden and River Herring panel, our board. And so that happens amongst all these states. These states get to select the people that can be subject matter experts. I mentioned the governor's appointee and the legislative appointee, and then technically the governor gets another choice, and that's through the fisheries agency in the state. So in Maryland's case, it's the fisheries director that is typically sitting at that seat, or somebody within the staff hierarchy at Maryland DNR that's really an expert in management in some way. So there's 3 seats per state. And then we also have, so this is really an exercise in states' rights in a state compact. And then you ultimately have within the commission, there's a whole level of staff that support each species. So the states fill in a management board, and then ultimately there's a technical committee, which the states support. And that's people that are scientifically proficient and involved in the science side of things. Generally mathematicians, statisticians, fishery biologists are in that technical committee. We have a law enforcement committee, and that's extremely important because we all learn in school if you can create laws, but it's important to enforce them. And we have tremendous men and women out there in green in so many places on the federal level. In I know, Lady C, you've done that work, right? On the Coast Guard, I believe. Yeah. Is that correct?
14 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Coast Guard works with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which oversees fisheries in the federal waters. Federal waters on the Atlantic are 300 to 200 miles. So we have these massive jurisdictions, and thankfully we have great enforcement agencies that overlap to work with each other through various agreements, just like the states are working together to manage, to enforce the laws, to give the scientific guidance. And it's an oversimplification of it all, but ultimately, the last piece of the puzzle that I'll mention is the advisory panels. They're an entry into this arena. And if it weren't for my opportunity to volunteer on the advisory panels, I never would have gotten the understanding and the ability to now sit at the table and try and represent Maryland's fishery interests. And ultimately, the commission is in place so that all states can follow within the guardrails that are set collectively. That's a very important thing, and when you share anything. So it's in the states pay into the system, the feds pay into the system, but it's important for people to really realize that it is a state-based system that the governors have the most control over, in my opinion. And ultimately it's an iterative process, and anything from advisory panel to even just the public attending, all the meetings are held in a very structured way, managed by a chair, vice chair, staff, managed by Robert's Rules of Order. Yeah. So you'll see a lot of that going, well, what's going on? And, it can be difficult, but it's an important way to have an ordered meeting because the stuff we're talking about is very important. Right. And I do have a cynical way of explaining it at times that say it's a way to just decide who gets to kill what from a fish perspective. Our nation's systems are, the conservation and management of our resources, and you have to conserve to be able to take. Conservation's not just protecting completely, right? It's a resource. We use it. And so I think a lot of times the public is upset with the commission when it seems like they're not taking proactive action to conserve the resource. And that's happened with striped bass repeatedly. I've been one of those public people. 8 to 10 years ago in my volunteer role at CCA, I was working with my fellow volunteers to tell the commission, all the state capitals, to say, hey, we need to pull back the reins a little bit. We're afraid that the population's sliding. So, to be involved in this for so long, you really have to be in it for the long run and recognize that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And working together, I said it the other day, actually, to somebody, it's a marathon, but thankfully it's a relay race. We can pass the baton. But that's what CCA does. And there's so many stakeholder driven organizations up and down our coast that engage on recreational, commercial, for hire components of the fishery. Folks that we would categorize as maybe environmental groups that are not so much about the use, but overall the health and protection. And we kind of straddle that. We say that it's all about the health of the resource first, but we're also here to ensure anglers access to it. It is that public resource, and to me, if you look at CCA's mission and such, it's all about the general public, resource first, but general public. And that's what it belongs to. And I really try and focus on less of the engagement with our membership or the public and saying, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to think. This is the right thing. And really try and teach people, how to engage and how to think, not what to think. And I think that's lost in this day and age. So many people are easy or grab onto things and just repeat them. And we end up with one side versus the other. We're a very tribal society. But I try and encourage people in my role at CCA because I recognize in my lifetime, I've had so many different diverse opinions on the way that I want to participate in fishing. So many different experiences and opportunities. And you start to, when you're in this enough, you start to realize that everybody's voice matters. And to me, the more and more I do it, the more I care about the voices that aren't heard. And I'm very fortunate to be in this role at CCA to mention for that. And ultimately, who doesn't have a voice are our natural resources. So, ultimately, there's like I said, we've been talking about the state level stuff, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, but there's also a federal level.
Yes.
And in the federal level, 300 to 200 miles is on the Atlantic coast. There's councils, and the councils are work in partnership with NOAA Fisheries, which used to call themselves the National Marine Fisheries Service, but recently renamed. And they operate under federal law, the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Act, which changes the way that they operate. It changes the suite of species that they manage. And thankfully, all this stuff is available on their websites, the asmfc.org.
Yes, a very valuable resource. I have actually been on that site since I talked to you the other day. They have this it's supposed to be easy guide to understanding a lot of the basics things that you mentioned.
Does it have a lot of pictures?
It does, a lot of diagrams.
Pictures of fish and charts.
Yes, they go into just the basic education of what things mean, how they work. I encourage anyone who's interested in knowing more. That simple guide was really helpful to me. And I have a newfound respect, not just for what you do, but everyone involved. I mean, there were just so many different organizations, the ACCSR, I can go on with the acronyms, but just commercial, recreational, crabbing, it covered everything. And it's just a lot of work and a lot of effort from scientists, mathematicians.
All right,
it just goes on.
Stop pumping this guy up.
Well, it's
I'm
not me,
excited
it's
about
them.
it.
I mean, it really is.
This guy up. I heard you say that we're trying to conserve, but also get more people access. I mean, you can't pull from both. You can't burn both ends of the rope here. No, seriously though. There is a little bit of a dichotomy there, right? You want more people to have access to it, yet we want to conserve it. How do you and the CCA sort of manage that balance to ensure that that we can kind of serve both ends? Yeah.
So it's really educating and empowering anglers to understand their impact.
Right.
I think that's something we all need to do, especially in the environmental, looking at things through the environmental lens, our impact on Mother Earth. And so an empowered angler is one that can make a wise judgment on their actions. One example, straight bass, summertime. We should not be out catching and releasing straight bass in the summertime because science and studies show us, personally, you don't have to do it very long to realize that you'll kill a fish quick. And so one thing that we try and do is we've created a program called Release Sense. And it's been supported by academic partners in Texas, Shimano and CCA. So Texas A&M Sport Fish Science Center. We're fortunate enough that our Texas chapter and our national office support these academic entities and give an opportunity to educate people. So knowledge is power, and that's not just, that's not cliche. That's real. And the more and more that we can share as a community, I mean, how quickly do we share the right jig head, the right plastic, the right outboard, the right side scan? Well, if we also share that ethic,
Never.
Well, and if we share that ethic, that's where the conservation piece comes in, because you can understand your personal impact. It doesn't have to take, because you're taking from each other, right? From the resource. And so it's a balancing act, but it's also, being proactive and being forward thinking, to kind of take a step back, to pull in the reins. I like to explain it just the way we manage our bank accounts. You have to conserve what you have, but you're also spending it.
Yes.
And you have to find that balance. And there's
Right.
times at which you may have to spend too much. And thankfully we have parachutes in this country to, support people in that situation. In fisheries, it's not that simple. But ultimately it's the same concept, right? And access doesn't have to equal a dead fish. It can equal a lot more than that. In fact, the data behind recreational activity will show you that there's way more failed trips or zeros, skunks, than there are actual catches from folks. And actually, that's one of the hardest things to even estimate, because most people aren't going to talk about or remember or brag about a zero.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to try and explain all the survey systems and stuff that go into it, but a lot of management's understanding of our impact is based on surveys in the recreational fishery.
Yeah.
It's different in different components of the fishery, but
For
So-
sure.
We really need, we do a lot of things for the community, the Fishing Channel. We really need to build a component that does things for people who get skunked. Like I can't imagine.
support group.
I can't imagine the feeling of getting skunked, like not
Yeah.
catching a fish. What was
You
it?
should make a skunk shirt.
That's actually a good idea.
Love it.
Of course, but
That's not nice, though.
Skunk the
It's not
bay.
nice.
Skunk the
Um,
bay.
I have a question though.
Sure.
You mentioned all these different things that go into surveys. I was reading with the striped bass. Some of the things that go into not just for the striped bass survey, but for all surveys are the impact on predatory fish.
Mhm.
Can you explain that a little bit briefly?
So predator. Striped bass are a predatory fish,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what ultimately we're managing quite often. Most of the fish that recreational anglers pursue are predatory fish, and so they're they're predatory until they're not, right? Everything eats everything in the ocean.
Yes.
It's important to think about each fish's role in its point in time that you're attempting to understand it. And so with the fish that we catch, our community always thinks of it in the big adult phase, the big one that we can hold up and show off. But in management, we have to understand what it takes to get to that point,
Mm-hmm.
what it takes to feed them, what kind of water quality they live in, and what our impacts are. And so, we have this balancing act, and because it's never simple, and more, what managers are trying to do is manage based on the ecosystem. So understanding kind of the answers to all those pieces of the puzzle you're trying to unlock. And that's most recently happened with menhaden management, where they said, we understand that menhaden are a vital bait fish in the ecosystem in the mid-Atlantic and beyond. But the system is built on single species management. So only really keeping everything in a silo,
Okay.
not looking at how they interact. And we as board members can think about that all day long and make judgment calls, but everything's a single species stock assessment, a single species analysis. And so for the first time officially, menhaden have enacted a ecosystem-based reference point. And so what that means is they still do a single species assessment, which is saying how many menhaden can we take to ensure that we maintain the menhaden population at a certain level in the future. And then ultimately what the ecosystem-based reference point does is say, okay, if we're just thinking about menhaden, we can take, let's say, 100 fish. But based on studies of how menhaden relate to different predators, we need to then lower that bar a little bit to maybe take 80 fish. And that way those 20 are left in the ecosystem. And that's a new thing. It's a lot easier to theorize and talk about than actually enact policy on the water. And the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council is actually doing a great thing that I recommend people look into. It's called the ecosystem-based approach to fisheries management.
Yeah. We have a question that just came in from our buddy Lloyd, but I will say, from the times that I've been out on the bay recently, and I've been here for a while now, I've noticed that during the heat of the summer on the main stem of the bay, there's kind of a line where you stop catching dink rockfish. But that used to be, to me, all the way down to Point Lookout. Now it's like all the way up into, buoy 70, further north, well, way further north than that, but like all the way up to the chop tank is really all bluefish now. I haven't caught a single small rockfish out of that. I would guess you'd call that the southern portion of the mid bay.
Right, right. So ultimately, what's happened over time is management and a lot of the charts and figures that you can find on the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries website will show you the trend and the pictures, like you were mentioning earlier. The tables and pictures are where I zoom to in these documents to try and really carefully read the labels and then try and understand them. So what you're talking about is the same experience I've seen in over the last decade plus, is this change of where fish are available and then the change of their abundance when you find them. So is it a little school that's up and down real quick, and it's like, where are they? They should be a lot more fish. Or here goes a bait ball and there's no predators on it. It's like, where are the rockfish?
I've seen that a lot. That's a little disturbing when you see walls and walls of bait and nothing feeding them.
Well, I think there's environmental impacts too that we don't consider as well.
Yeah, I mean, so the Chesapeake Bay at one time supported something between 70 and 90% of the population of the East Coast of striped bass through various studies that shown that. That number is definitely declining. We're seeing the Hudson River supply more of the stock into the ecosystem, or into the population. The surveys that look into how many fish are being born each year are very vital to kind of give you that starting point and understanding of how high of an abundance should there be of that year class, or those fish that are all born together. And so that's reviewed each year in Maryland and Virginia waters, by professionals at the agencies. And that's a really important part because it's your starting point. And then ultimately, population and life is an exercise in exponential decay. It's happening to all of us, unfortunately. So the moment they're born, that's the most fish there's ever going to be in that class. And then over time, they're slowly disappearing. And so we've had some decent year classes in the last decade, but in the last 3 years, we've had below average, almost lowest on record. So that's part of it, because an 18-inch rockfish is about 3 years old. And so you're going to see plenty of them, but it makes sense to see plenty 12-inch rockfish. They're about 2 years old. And as they get older and older and older, there's less and less of them. And in the Chesapeake Bay, they're also starting to see that that females are leaving the bay a little bit earlier and staying in the coastal stock until they return to spawn, which they can do each year. But ultimately, there's all these changes happening. And a big driver, as we mentioned, environmental conditions and water quality. Environmental conditions directly relate to striped bass spawning success. And it's not so much the sewage plant overflow per se, but it's really about what happens in the wintertime. And then nature's ability to drive phytoplankton blooms and the other things that little tiny rockfish need, and the water systems which they need. And so it's environmental in many different ways, but it's really temperature. And as we see our climate patterns change completely in this country, or in this world, has been talked about everywhere. It's real, and that's what striped bass are facing. And in fisheries, I've seen some amazing presentations done by folks. It's the benefit of having NOAA manage fisheries. They also understand weather, and they show you these blobs of water and what's changed. And the cold water fish rely on the current coming from the north and the Gulf Stream, and all those things change. So the available habitat for these species totally varies. And the last piece of the puzzle in the Chesapeake that directly relates to the specific areas you're talking about is quite a few years ago, another hat I wear is I'm the chairman of the Maryland's Advisory Commission for DNR. So in sitting in that for more than a decade now, not in the chair role, but on the commission, you get to learn, and that's where DNR seeks advice from us. 15 different people in the state of Maryland get to serve on that. And we were getting presentations from their resource assessment, or I think it's their water quality division. I can't think of the right name, but it talked about, if you've seen some of the stuff they do on like the dissolved oxygen squeeze, where they have monitoring systems out there, and they only understand, they're starting to understand, where fish could even exist. And there's a great tool called Click Before You Cast. And it helps you forecast whether fish could even exist there because of oxygen or because of the prevailing condition. So some of the first presentations on that were given because of the request of Southern Bay charter captains that noticed that their post-spawn habits of fish were not what they had recognized for decades. And they went, where are all these fish? And they ultimately found out that core sampling in the lower bay and the deeper trenches, kind of like below Sharps Island, let's say, down to below the mouth of the Patuxent, even the mouth of the Patuxent Potomac, there's these perpetual dead zone areas that actually have no life. not even bacterial life, because there's been no oxygen for so long, nothing lives there. Well, straight bass
Yeah.
they eat worms, they eat clam worms and mayworms and all these things that come out of the bottom, and that is a key protein post spawn.
Yeah.
So that all relates to it, and it's these things that we need to understand. It's not just as simple as, oh, they're not here anymore.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah,
I broke that down. Thank you.
I want to ask, later on what, revisit sort of the dead zone thing, because that's something that's been on my mind for a while, and if there can be anything done about it. But we have a page of questions that have come in,
yeah.
and let's make sure that we give the audience their due. Flip of all trades is a good friend of mine, says he's trying to get a daily double on this. He says, what are some of the challenges you face in your field, and how did you overcome them? Any lessons learned?
We were talking about
number
that.
2, should we give them 2 questions? No,
Sure.
we'll give them 2. 2, can you define predatory fish versus native?
Oh, I love this. Yeah.
Okay, so
This guy is far smarter than he looks.
You must have been on the ASMFC
really
website earlier.
Yeah. So challenges I face, number one, what I see in the mirror every day. Staying committed and not and recognizing that I represent a lot of people, but I'm very fortunate to have this position and be in a position to help, fight for the future of what's been so important to me in my life. And so I do think about that a lot, and I also encourage people to do the same, because I think a lot of the conversation I see on social media is probably the number one thing that undermines success of organizations like ours that are trying to bring people together. You have people that are facing each other in an unaccountable fashion that can click and point and do these things, and hide behind a screen. And so I think when you're talking about managing something that belongs to all of us, face-to-face respectful dialogue is the best. And that's why these commissions exist and why these professionals are to be respected no matter what way they engage, right? Because they're professionals. And so I call it the chattering class. The folks that are out there, they have something to say, they're going to take a cheap shot. And guess what? None of you ever show up at the actual meeting, and none of you show up to raise money. None of you show up to volunteer. So that is the biggest weak spot we have in our community. And there's plenty of great reasons to not show up, but for the most part, I think it's because people are lazy. And predatory fish versus native fish.
Yeah, that's it.
No,
it's true. Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you mean invasive versus versus native? Because native fish can be predatory.
Well,
that's true.
Well, I mean, he is
double. You're going to eat something, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say invasive versus native, because that's the direct,
right.
So,
well, and a lot of the invasives that we have are predatory, right?
Oh,
so
predators, yeah.
Blue catfish and the snakehead are the 2 big ones that people talk about.
Yeah. So I mean, ultimately,
trout.
Yeah. I mean, brown trout. Can you believe brown trout made it here from Germany, and then were carried in a wagon across the prairie in the late 1800s?
Yeah.
Like, think about that. And so anyway, unfortunately, snakeheads have been carried around the state in 5-gallon buckets. Who knows how well the blue cats were spread out? But ultimately, a native fish is pretty simple. It's native to this region, and there's a lot of them. And then we have the Continental Divide out to the west, that differentiates the Chesapeake with the Mississippi. So the blue catfish is actually one of the species that's native to the U.S., not native to the Chesapeake. It's a major predator, but it's an invasive predator. And so invasive and non-native are not the same thing. Invasive means it has an outsized impact on the ecosystem that it's not native in. And so therefore it is invasive. Think about anything that is invasive. It's right. You don't want it. And so ultimately that's just a designation so that certain things can happen. And the biggest challenge with these fish is that they're adding more and more to the system, the ecosystem, but also the management system. So how do you take a really difficult job of counting fish, estimating fish, managing the activities of millions of anglers and thousands of commercial fishermen, and then balancing it all out. So there's a lot of complexity there. And again, it goes back to making sure we're looking at the ecosystem and the health of that for all.
Yeah. I think I have an idea of how blue catfish spread so much. When I was a kid and we didn't know better, and nobody told us any better, we would catch blue cats. And when we didn't have a stringer, we would just toss them up on shore, right? It's terrible. I would never do that now, like the cruelty in that. But like we would go back, walk up to the house, come back a half an hour later, hot Georgia sun. and that blue cat would just be sitting out on the dirt and still alive. And I bet you if you took that fish and threw it back in the water, it would swim away. So I've heard that if you have a pond full of blue cats and there's a pond, close by, a heavy rain, and then you'll probably have blue cats in the next pond over. I mean, they're unbelievably tough fish.
Yeah.
Hardy, and they can just put up with just about anything.
Well, we heard similar stories with snakehead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, both those fish species are definitely hardy. They're definitely very slimy. That slime is protection and keeps them safe out of water. And so there's a lot there. And ultimately, blue cats were released in Virginia waters in the 70s with the idea that there'd be a robust game fish fishery in the James River. And there's still folks there that love them and want them there. They're all over the Chesapeake now. And my biggest concern is their outsized impact in competition with striped bass, but all eating juvenile striped bass, because the blue cats thrive in just about every striped bass spawning area at this point.
Yeah.
And so little tiny striped bass is food, and big fat blue cats are aggressive. I mean, I've seen folks reporting catching blue cats breaking on the surface right outside of DC. So they're not like a normal catfish, just lazy on the bottom. They're a very aggressive critter. And so there's a lot of challenges there. And hey, we got to do our best to try and.
Question coming from Sean Fenwick. How are you today, Sean? He says, what do you love most about this job? What are you trying to say? It's a hobby? No, I think he's trying to say it's such an awesome job. It probably doesn't feel that way.
I beg to differ. No, it's
what do you love most about this job?
Yeah.
And why?
Yeah. And I mean, I mentioned some of this earlier on. I think ultimately it's being able to stand up and speak out and make a difference for people that, I consider friends, a community I care about, and something that's been so important to my life. I'm 40 years old, and I've spent a lifetime fishing with my dad, fishing with family. It's in our blood, and it's led to some of the best experiences outdoors that wouldn't have happened without fishing, but weren't because of the fish or what we caught. So that's it. I'm lucky to work with everybody.
You said something really profound that I want to touch on when someone asked, what's the toughest thing about your job? And you said looking in the mirror. Mm-hmm. And what hit me is that, there's a lot of things that go with your job, which we talked about. People reaching out to you and saying not so nice things. But if a job doesn't change you and challenge you and really challenge you enough to look in the mirror, I thought that was one of the most profound things you said tonight. So I think that can be equally enjoyable, right? If you're a person of professional growth and want to be challenged, that could be, a double-edged sword, but I think that's really important. And I just wanted to point it out that real quick.
No, I appreciate that.
I wish when I looked in the mirror, I looked like that.
I know. I went really deep.
No, and you're right. And that's probably the best part about it is the challenge. It is the personal growth. And I truly have a tremendous network of people that I rely on. I talk to people daily that help keep me focused. And I mean, captains that are on the water, I was fishing with some charter captains recently, and just learning from what affects their business. And that gives me the power to come to the table and try and find solutions that work for as many Marylanders as possible.
Right on.
So again, you have to be honest with yourself. And I think the number one failure of most that work in policy, which is politics, is hypocrisy. And, I say a lot, but I've been told that I'm consistent too. And to me, that means I'm doing my job right. And I'm meeting the challenge that's in front of me. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I think it's a measure of success. And we can look all around this country and see a ton of leaders, but very few with leadership qualities that actually take the hard road sometimes and get things done for the benefit of the people. I mean, too many teams.
Well said, sir.
I think we should all take that to heart. Fishing is a lot more than just pulling a big fish out of the water and taking a photo. I think it's just about everything you said tonight.
Yep.
And we can look at ourselves the same way and challenge ourselves to see a little bit beyond and get more involved. I think bigger change would happen.
Absolutely. That's what fishing does every day. I mean, fishing is a challenge. It's first, will the motor start? Did I charge the battery? And you love that feeling when you finally get out of the no-wake zone and you push up the throttle. Like, that's great. If you're not appreciating that, you're missing out. And then even a skunk day is great. That challenge actually feels good. That's science.
Yes.
It absolutely
Even
is.
if you catch a tiny little lizard trying to go after big reds and cobia.
I'm going to take a big step back for this question.
This is an easy question.
This is all you.
Which, oh, there's a question. Okay, so how do we get omega netting out of the, oh, yeah, right on.
This is an easy answer. This is a 100% extremely easy answer. The management authority for Menhaden was given to the Virginia Marine Resources Commission. They were appointed by the governor of Virginia. And like I said earlier, the ASMFC, that whole process is to determine what state gets what. And the state of Virginia is the last state which has an operating reduction fishery, that is omega protein out of Reedville. And so they're the last ones. Every other state has stopped it for one reason or another. And so ultimately it's up to the powers that be in Richmond, which the governor has the most control over. That's Governor Youngkin. I just wrote an op-ed in partnership with Mike Leonard of the American Sport Fishing Association that just went out in the Richmond Times-Dispatch last week. You'll see it elsewhere. And we call it out right there. We say, look, we're bringing solutions to the table, and we're saying, where are you? The crickets. I mean, how often does our government just not respond to the people? It's happening more and more, and this happening in Richmond. And Omega has been lining the pockets of politicians on both sides of the aisle for a long time. They talk about jobs in Reedville. They talk about minority jobs, union labor, that kind of thing. And the reality is they're owned by an international company out of Canada, the world's largest aquaculture industry. And so another thing you can do is stop eating farm-raised salmon. They're sucking the bay dry, 51,000 metric tons of menhaden. That equals about 250 million individual fish. Think of how many cobia, red drum, you name it, eat menhaden, right? Dolphins, birds, you name it. 250 million. Imagine 250 million snacks or food being taken away from us and what that does to the ecosystem. And so ultimately it's a matter of staying engaged and realizing that this is a big problem. And that's my perspective, right? And that's the perspective of so many people in the Chesapeake Bay. But in the end, it is a public resource. Those jobs matter to the people that have them. That company matters to those people. And so this is a classic example of the trade-offs that occur in natural resource management. And I don't think it's fair that that company has the outsized quota that they have on the Atlantic coast. I think other states can use it. And actually, there's a reallocation happening right now. And states to the north need the menhaden. The state of Maine has seen a boom in menhaden abundance up there. And because of that, it's all part of the climate changing and where these fish exist. In my time in fisheries, there was a time when menhaden didn't exist in any abundance above Cape Cod. Wow. Now they're there. They're in the Gulf of Maine. They're available to their fishermen. So if the commission's doing its job, again, I'm fortunate enough to not to sit on this board. Dr. Colden does. But if the commission's doing its job, it's recognizing this shift of abundance and then making it available to the states that need it, especially because in the lobster fishery, which is such a major economic driver in the Northeast, they rely on Atlantic herring for bait for forever. The Atlantic herring populations are collapsing and they're not available. And so now the available bait that is there, we have a situation where states from the South are trading quota to the North, which is like a Band-Aid approach. And Virginia has the most to give. It would be really, really good to see Omega act like the good neighbor they claim they are and actually follow through with some of the gentlemen's agreements they've made in the past and fish where they're not impacting each other and neighbors, because we all know, they're, whatting on our leg and telling us it's raining.
Yeah. I don't want to cut you off, but I want to make sure that we get everyone's questions.
I said it was a simple answer, but I had to keep ranting.
No. And Shore Sharp is asking a question very much like the last one, but I'm putting it up here just to also represent the opinion and just emphasize that there are a lot of people asking these questions. Shore Sharp asked, I have a question. What are your thoughts of the Omega fleet? Why in the world are they still allowed to person net menhaden in Virginia waters? What can we do to protest omega protein? We on the Fishing Channel, we really do try to stay neutral on a lot of issues. When I see things like that mistake where they broke a net down there in the Southern Bay and killed, and just basically chunked a bunch of dead game fish. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not staying neutral on that. That's, Sikorski, you just pointed out how they go over their limit every year, how they're given a light tap on the wrist. And I'm sorry.
Just over 100% accurate. They went over their limit as far as we know 1 year. Not
okay. But still, it's like.
Yeah, no, you're right. And the game fish thing is completely illegal.
You don't have to stay neutral when you're just breaking the law.
No,
right?
exactly. And the second you break the law, you're no longer a fisherman, you're a thief.
Right.
And
Right.
the killing of those big game fish is against the law. And I hope VMRC slaps them where it belongs, because that was like 275 red drum that you mentioned earlier, 20, 30 years old. Think about that. It's just disrespecting the resource and each other. And it's because of this gear, the purse seine. Maryland kicked it out of our bay waters in 1931, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's something else we mentioned in our op-ed. It's like, Virginia, find a way to control this so all users of the bay can benefit and the bay itself can benefit. And, the caps and quotas in place are not based on science, and we need to advance that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question coming in from De Pesca a Pesca.
Oh, I think you should read that one. It's a little far from you.
Okay. He's a good friend of the show.
Yes,
Yes, community engagement is a challenge in all professional fields where there's a gap in getting community involved.
True.
Where is CCA excelling and engaging community, and where is there room for growth? My man wants
there's
question
plenty.
of the night.
You got to go on the CCA website and see all the events that are coming up and all that they do, and read the articles. There's so much going on. I mean, you go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really simple. Number one, become a member. And because we are a membership organization, it costs $35 a year. You get a great magazine, and you're supporting our work. And if you're a member anywhere, you're a member. It doesn't matter if you sign up in Maryland, Virginia. If you're anywhere in the United States, you can be a CCA member. We have chapters from Maryland to Texas that are very active, and the full West Coast. And so that's one place that we are a community engagement organization. We're a membership 501c3. But in Maryland, our number one place that we connect with the community at large is our habitat work. And we have a Living Reef Action Campaign. We built reef balls with every single fifth grader in Calvert County last spring. We just put them on the schedule this year, this fall. And we do that through a mobile program. I think we've worked in 14 different jurisdictions now since 2015, not just with students. We work with community as well. And so we have tons of great outreach and engagement on that. Building fish habitat. It's the most selfish thing I do. I tell them all the time. Like, why are we building reef balls? I'm like, so we have a better place to go fishing. And, we do that. And to me, it's the most important thing, because it takes the water quality and habitat piece of the puzzle, and it takes something that's out of sight and out of mind and brings it to people. And I knew that we were a success in that program where in Carroll County, where it started, we had teachers tell us that their students were coming back and telling them, we want pet oysters. Because we talk about the role of the oyster. A whole other tragedy of the commons that's played out in the Chesapeake Bay over the last 150 years. We've decimated our bay's filtering capacity and the habitat value that it brings. It's a we. I mean, we've all been part of it. So it's complicated, but that's it. I mean, habitat and membership, come on and get involved. And if you have kids, we give away free kid memberships. It's the Kids Corner on our website.
Yeah, I'll say, even if you don't agree with everything that David's sharing with us tonight, or you have your own views on conservation, if you like to fish, the CCA has awesome tournaments that are really fun to fish in.
Oh, well, yeah. We'll go over that.
It costs what? Usually like $65 for the membership, and that gets you.
Yeah, we try and keep them. We try and keep them as cheap as possible. We don't have cash prizes. It's one of our policies to avoid a lot of the complexity that can come with that. We give great prizes out because of our great sponsors, and we make it as cheap as possible. We actually have one coming up September 17th, the red trout tournament.
But the swag that comes with that, I mean, you join a tournament. You guys have sent me a performance tee, a really nice sweatshirt. I mean, that sweatshirt, I feel like would have cost $65 in a store.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's a great organization to get involved in.
Well, I love
fun
that
tournaments, fun camaraderie. Those tournaments are they always have a little bit of extra to draw me in, because they're more fun. They're not quite as intense. There's a little bit more camaraderie there. I can call my buddies and be like, hey, are you on them? And they'll be like, sure, yeah, come,
Yeah. And what you'll realize, so Lacey, you mentioned in the beginning that I've been part of a government relations committee in CCA, and we do everything by committee. We do everything by local chapter. And a local chapter is just a group of people that are committed to helping raise dollars for CCA through a banquet fundraising dinner. We have them throughout the state. Anybody could start one tomorrow, in Virginia as well. But ultimately, we try and encourage our local chapters to drive these tournaments. And that's where the Kent Narrows Flying Light Tackle Tournament has been. I think this year was 19 years. I was a part of that chapter when I joined CCA, and I remember getting together for, drinks and dinner and coming up with the next great thing we wanted to do. And that's how all these tournaments have come about. There's no big corporate machine cranking them out. It's a small handful of volunteers. And so if it's not what people want to see, I want to know about that. And we have, our invasive species count out right now, where it's not a tournament, but we're asking people to catch invasive species and get prizes. In the wintertime, we're going to have, starting November 1st, the chain pickerel tournament. So it's not like a single day. It's November through the end of February. And to me, it's just, actually our objective is to conserve, promote, and enhance our resources. And so conserve, we've talked about. Promote is fish. Go fishing.
Yes.
Compete, have fun. And enhances that part.
Can we get to this first, just before you get to the question?
I think it relates.
Yeah, it relates. So the stock assessment for striped bass. Did I read it correctly? 2023 it will come out?
So it will come out this fall. It's almost finished right now, so 22. And the stock assessment is this massive scientific effort. I encourage people to look for the pictures.
Yeah.
The one was done in 2018 that included data up to 2017. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's referred to as the terminal year. It's the last year. We've been waiting for an update. Every species has them every so often, and that's what these technical committees do, and the technical team at the commission that the state supports. So ultimately, we have one coming this fall, because it's going to tell us the status of the stock based on estimates, based on surveys, the population of fish, and then that it lets us understand where we stand with relation to certain goals that are set. Right. Because the other piece of the puzzle is what's called an FMP, the Fishery Management Plan. Fishery Management Plan has goals and objectives and lots of other details to it about how you manage these fish. Folks may remember Amendment 7 just finished and was adopted by the commission.
Yes, I have that right here.
There you go. So that is the 7th amendment to the Fishery Management Plan. The board is in charge, and they decide these are the rules by which we're going to manage. Right. Now, the stock assessment is done with new data sources, new information. This one's just what's called a stock assessment update. Every once in a while, there's called a benchmark. A benchmark kind of like decides what the different data sources are and adds different ingredients to the mix, basically. But ultimately, what it's going to do is give us those great charts and help us understand what's happened and how that relates to what might happen for projections into the future. And right now, the reason this fall is really important is when approving Amendment 7 earlier this year, the board agreed, recognizing that 3 years of poor recruitment, and unfortunately, we're hearing that this year's numbers may not be as good as we hope. Mm-hmm. Mediocre is the term I've heard. So ultimately, we know that there's year classes in the fishery that aren't doing great. Therefore, we can assume that, thinking about it like money, our income's is down. Right. So we have to be careful about our spending. And so the board took proactive action to say that if projections say that we won't meet certain goals by 2029, which is our rebuilding timeline of the population, then, and if the assessment says that a 5% reduction in fishery removals is required to meet that goal by 2029, then we're definitely going to take action. So my gut, if I'm a betting man, tells me that we're taking action. If we're smart, we're taking action no matter what to reduce mortality, because we already know what's in the hopper and what's coming. There's not enough fish out of the Chesapeake coming to fulfill the population.
So I recommend going to these meetings, reading what's on the websites to know what Amendment 7 is, what it entails, because these may result in new guidelines. I know someone was asking about some changes. So all the assessments, all the work that's going in Amendment 7 will produce new guidelines if necessary, and what they will be, correct?
Well, so Amendment 7 is the plan we operate within. The stock assessment, when complete, is likely to trigger action.
Thank you. Okay.
Because
so that information is available to the public, and like you said, go to the meetings, go to the websites. It's all there.
And Steve's question, I think, speaks to some of that a little bit, and what a lot of people would like to hear, which is when will Maryland implement a slot limit size and stop taking thousands of 19-inch fish per day? You can sort of hear the emotion and passion behind some of these questions.
Yeah. So the slot is something that has worked great for redfish, that 18 to 27 or something like that. Pretty much exists throughout their range. And so what that concept is that we're protecting the spawning stock, because redfish and striped bass, both species, only spawn effectively a couple times a decade. That's been our observation. That's why we have these weak year classes right now. Like, that is a pretty common thing. It's unfortunate that it's been a more common thing for striped bass. So ultimately, what setting a slot can do is say, okay, we want to protect these big fish, and that actually exists on the coast right now. There's nothing over 35 can be harvested recreationally, and there's very minimal commercial catch of those big fish on the coast, but some, I mean, actually plenty in the Northeast. So ultimately, actually, I made the recommendation or request to the technical committee at the last meeting. The technical committee was saying, hey, we're going to be doing this stock assessment. We're going to be doing these projections. What kind of measures might the states want to have ready, kind of on the shelf as a tool to implement? And I, for a long time, have thought a slot for striped bass in the Chesapeake Bay is a very good idea. The whole 18, 19, 20, it's complicated. I won't get into that. But ultimately, an 18-inch fish makes sense to me as a starting point. They are small. There are a lot of them out there. But ultimately, they're quickly replaceable. That nature replaces that 18-inch fish in 3 years, 3 to 4 years, right? And then a slot on top is saying, okay, everything else that made it into like spawning age, we're going to now leave alone. And a lot of people don't realize the commercial fishery in Maryland long ago implemented a 36-inch maximum. And I've been saying, actually, throughout this entire administration of this governor, I met with a pound net fisherman early on in the Hogan administration. And one of the things he and I talked about was, hey, why can't recreational fishery do a max size limit? I said, let's do it. Let's work together on it. Well, crickets. But here we are. Unfortunately, it takes the downturn of the stock to get to this point, but I've made the request. And I made a request about at some point last year to get an idea of what this might bring us. And so in 2018, when that last stock assessment was done, that triggered the 18% reduction in mortality that was done coast-wide, which we all saw in the water in 2020. That's where we went to 1 fish at 19. The charter boats still get 2 fish. That's a whole other can of worms. But ultimately, I asked, based on that data, that 18% reduction, had we put a max size in there as well, what would it have meant reduction-wise? Analysis came back, and I think if you had like an 18 to 32-inch slot, ultimately, it would have implemented a 31% reduction instead of 18% reduction. Because what you're ultimately doing is saying, all right, we estimate how many fish are out there in the water. Now we're removing from exploitation certain components of it. Let them get big enough so you're not too successful. Because heck, if the limit was 12 inches, we'd be out there way too successful for our own good. Yeah. So you have to slide it up to a point. But then again, you don't want to get too high, because then people aren't successful. And also you're getting into older fish, and you get into that. Actually, there's contaminants, there's meat quality challenges. I mean, big rockfish don't taste good. You got to make something into a fish cake to make it taste good. I wish we could keep 15-inch rockfish, because I've been told by people back in time that they're the best ones. They're the pan rock. But we can't. So anyway, there may be a slot coming, is the long story short, and we'll see.
Ryan Mullins suggests 20 to 30 inches, 2 per fisherman. Okay.
There you go. It's one way to do it. And we'll see.
Yeah, there's so much that we can talk about. We didn't get into proper recommended catch and release techniques, which are really important. We talk about the bigger entities and their decision making. What's equally important is our decision making when we're on the boats or on a kayak or on a pier. Thank you. It starts with us. It starts with the man in the mirror. So we need to start there too. And really quick, since we didn't get to it, is there a place on a website with the CCA or on any of the websites I mentioned earlier where we can learn more about recommended proper catch and release technique?
I'm looking for visual aids here. So yes, and you mentioned our fishing tournaments. I don't have one in reach, but our fishing tournament rulers actually have some tips on them. Okay. And they all come from releasesense.org, which is our website I mentioned earlier.
Release Sense? Okay. Yeah.
So we're
going to post it on our Facebook page. Also with this, when we post this live as well.
I'm going to have a plug for a friend up in New York, a guy who is just a passionate striped bass fisherman, created saveamillionbass.org. His concept was, if we save 1 million fish through better catch and release techniques,
Yes.
1 million more fish in the system.
Yes. Oh my goodness, my adrenaline's going here.
Yeah. And he's actually somebody you've probably seen on TV. He's an economic advisor, a guy named Steve Leisman on CSNBC, I think, or CNBC. He ultimately created this with a team of friends and family, and I think it has some great visuals. It talks about keeping your hands wet. Let's not forget, a fish breathes in the water, not in the air. They live in that zero gravity environment their whole life. So the second you're picking them up, stop it, get them back in the water. And I love pictures. I have them all over my office, right there. But how many more do you need before you're just causing harm to these critters? Redfish, I see it all over the place right now. And I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm not trying to be a critic, but the whole group redfish picture thing, get those fish back in the water. They can handle hot water a lot more than or hot weather a lot better than a striped bass. But, to get all those fish on the deck and up in their hands and stuff, people are watching. I've heard about it in management meetings about the concern of discard mortality on large red drum. And again, who do we think we are, to waste a 30-year-old animal that the rules and regulations have said you can't kill them.
Yeah.
So who are we to sidestep that law? Frankly, we should all be cited for that if it's happening. And same thing with striped bass. I know guys were complaining about being cited up in the Susquehanna area. Like, oh, NRP gave me a ticket because I held the fish up too long. Well, yeah, it belongs in the water.
Yeah.
Well, it starts with education. So that's where we're going to post this, because a lot of people just don't know. It may not be intentional.
Exactly.
Or brutish towards fish or anything like that.
And let's never forget that fishing does kill fish, and that's okay. They're delicious. It's a resource. It's not like this one way or the other, right? It's okay.
Just handle with care and be more educated about it.
Yeah.
You were going to say something?
No, I think when I'm laying down about to fall asleep, I think in circles. I'm like, catch and release, and then what? But yes, there's an interesting conflict in the whole catch and release idea. But and you can think about that until you go blue in the face. But
and have you ever thought of
definite best practices for sure?
And there's a serious, and I'm serious about this, and I've said this in a lot of meetings. There were some leaders at DNR that are not there right now that I think were completely ignorant to the approach in striped bass management recently about the impact catch and release has. They talked about it in an outsized way to ignore real harvest mortality issues that exist in the state. I think they actually lost an opportunity to educate people and empower people by doing that. Closing down the month of April to catch and release is ridiculous. It was already closed where it has an impact on the fish, but doing that was stupid, and it undermines the opportunity to educate. And all fishing might have catch and release as part of it, and it's something called a regulatory discard. So if a regulation requires you to discard that fish or release that fish, you're releasing it, and that could mean you caught a 17-inch rockfish. Your intention of the day was not to go out and catch and release a whole bunch of fish, which can have an outsized impact in hot water, but you went out fishing anyway. And so it's like, hold on, people, let's step back a little bit and have an intellectual and educational conversation about it and realize that anybody that goes fishing, again, may kill a fish, and that's okay. And it's just a matter of realizing, your own self-impact, like we've talked about a lot tonight.
For sure. I don't want to hold up you any longer. There's so much we can talk about. I'm so psyched right now. I'm going to be awake for at least another hour.
Yeah, I won't stop.
This is the second time we've had David on the show, and I always feel like at the end I'm like, we covered 1/10 of it.
Well, yes. And I could stay all night, believe it or not, but recently I did a podcast with a group, and we talked about it in the beginning, and we said, all right, what's your record? How long have you gone? And how long can we last? And they said, 2 hours, 30 minutes. And we ended up hitting the stop button at 2 hours, 31 minutes. So I think I have the record for longest marathon of talking about fish, because I do it all day, every day. But no, I understand we have important things to do tonight.
I think we're pretty close to our longest right now. I think we've gone 1 hour and 15 once or twice, maybe.
This is important, though. I mean, really good stuff.
But we got a prize to give away.
We have a prize.
And
great questions.
I think we're clearly going to break the record tonight, because we're not going to give away the prize and close in like 18 seconds.
It's tough.
Right?
Yeah.
So sweet prize.
I'm glad it's not me deciding this, because I see other questions coming in, and it's a hard.
We got $100 that'll go towards an optical galleria. Again, those are in a pair of glasses that aren't in plastic. Those great fishing glasses.
Yes.
And optical gallerias in Easton, Centerville, and Ocean City. They also, gave me these amazing glasses that took me from blind to seeing
Almost seeing.
incredibly well. Seeing what I'm looking at in the mirror every day, which I'm not too happy. And an amazing choice of an Under Armour CCA hat. Can you show us that one more time?
Yeah, it's actually two of them.
Those are sweet.
Lovely.
Yeah, you get the pick.
One of them was worn to catch the world record.
That's right.
World record.
Pending world record.
Redfish on a fly.
On a fly.
Did we mention you guys that Lady C and I were next to that boat?
Right next to them.
Like probably 45 minutes before they caught that fish. I had literally 8,000 redfish on my side scan, and we didn't catch a single one. So,
but this is about the winner, though.
This is
not
about
us.
Not about us. So can we get a drum roll? This is a pretty awesome
I'm
prize.
excited.
I want this.
Bring it.
So it's going to be flip of all trades for
Yes.
asking.
Winner. I think this is the first time we've had a repeat winner. Which question do you remember exactly?
Yeah, so it looks like 834. What are some of the challenges you face in your field, and how'd you overcome them?
Okay,
Learned.
there it is.
Ultimately, I'm not trying to be. My answer was not trying to be flip or criticize people, but it's the truth. I mean, we're our own worst enemy, and I'd love to see more people stand up and.
Oh yes. Oh my God.
Oh wait, flip of all trades. That's Lloyd. He hasn't won before. We have a new winner.
No. Yes. Okay.
We have a new winner. That's great.
Right on.
Well, it's all about accountability. One thing I'll mention because it's important. I'm actually chairing a recreational fisheries data task force that was created by legislation last year that I worked with other stakeholders and legislators to write. And it was because we as a recreational fishing community have demanded from DNR for many, many years, improved surveys, improved information, improved data collection of us, because they rely on a federal system that does not support the decision-making that they do. And they don't have the tools they need. And we said as a community for years now, we've done it on a federal level in every state, count our catch, do better, develop better science. And I'm really honored to be chairing a committee that met yesterday for 4 hours, is meeting tomorrow for 4 hours, and it's all volunteer stakeholders. Every single one of them, and everybody was in attendance for 4 hours yesterday during the workday. They're going to be doing it again. And that is just a cross section of what our community continues to do to take care of this resource we benefit from, we feed ourselves with, and we get so much enjoyment from. And so the take home message to everybody is find opportunities to step up. I gravitated towards CCA because it's an organization that gets things done. And I found some of the most tremendous people in our region as part of this organization. Don't believe what you see out there. You hear the words coming out of my mouth. Somebody like me couldn't do this work with the confidence of our volunteer leaders if they didn't trust my judgment and this wasn't real. A lot of what you hear about things that we're against is nonsense. We're in this for the benefit of the public, and I'm here to prove it. And I can only do that because of members and because of other people. And like I said, let's challenge each other to do better by our resource, because we all know fishing is way too important to have it slip away.
Well,
amen. I feel
I'm
like
inspired.
I'm in church
I'm
right
inspired.
now. Right on.
We're gonna figure out how to come volunteer at one of these upcoming events.
Yeah, we're gonna just do it.
Do it.
I think your advice transcends fishing. I mean, I'm a counselor. It goes into counseling too. It's beautiful. I love what you just shared. I got goosebumps.
Yeah, power of now. Just do it.
Do it.
So how do they just get it done? Like, how can people get involved before we close out for the evening?
So ccamd.org is our website. It's simply become a member. So many people let that lapse and don't do that. And without that, we don't have a strong voice. Beyond that, there's a series of efforts you can do. In fact, I have a little card here that we're reproducing here shortly, and actually has 10 things you can do to support CCA Maryland. I won't read them all off, but we're constantly working on this, and we run as efficient as we possibly can to maximize the dollars that are being provided to us. The vast majority of our budget comes from our members and our sponsors. So that gives us the flexibility to do what we want, not listen to our funders. And that's something that's unique in CCA and makes it more difficult. But it's not all about dollars. It's about the power of the people. So when you see action alerts, when you see anything else come out from us, sign up for our newsletter. give us a try. I mean, if you don't want to give us $35 yet, give us a year. See if we prove ourselves right. If I walk the walk and talk, of all the talk I do, and the same thing for all our members. Let's work together. Let's make Maryland better. Let's make our fisheries better. The Chesapeake Bay is a national treasure. It fuels so much of fisheries that we all enjoy up and down the East Coast. And if we're not serious about holding folks accountable in Annapolis and Richmond in a respectful and knowledgeable and fact-based way, this is not an arena for sleeing, stuff. That's happening across our country in so many arenas. This isn't left versus right, red versus blue. It's people that want something better versus people that are trying to take.
Thank you.
Right on. Well, you're not running for anything, but you got my vote. Just
Nope.
Somebody look, check this out. Like, scroll up.
I know.
Look at this. Sikorsky
Oh, well,
2024.
see? It's unanimous.
I don't know who that guy is. He spelled my name wrong.
Well, thank you so much, David.
I
Oh
have
my
one
goodness.
last little plug.
Yes,
One last plug. October 1st. This is another example of what we do and how you all can help. October 1st in the city of Baltimore, where I happen to live, we have the Chesapeake Fishing Open. This was created by one of our life members, a gentleman who worked with other partners to create an event because he wanted to give back to an area that mattered so much to him. He grew up in Linthicum, Maryland, fishing the Middle Patapsco, a river that is not what it should be, not what it used to be, and created ChesapeakeFishingOpen.com is the website. And it was first year in 2019. And then, of course, the pandemic has impacted it. And if you go to that website, you'll see that it's a community-focused thing. It's what fishing should be all about. We have a family and youth fishing derby that day. Youth will get the free fishing equipment that they can take home if they don't have it. Thanks to our friends at Talkins and Angler Sports Center combos for kids. Yamaha is supporting a trash cleanup through their Right Waters program with Maryland Waterways Foundation. And then we also have a headboat coming up from Kent Island with father and son, I believe, captain and mate, that will be taking kids on rotational trips. So, city youth centers and community groups, anybody can sign up. It's 100% free for family, youth, and trash cleanup. But what funds it, what fuels it are corporate sponsors, but also folks that want to go fishing. And so the fishing tournament part, again, is relatively cheap. It's like $75 a person. I think max of 6 on a boat. And the focus of this tournament is catch, photo, release rockfish, because while there's nothing wrong with keeping a rockfish, I actually kept one the other day. For tournaments, we try not to drive that extra pressure on these fish in the current status. Okay, so it's a catch, photo, release for rockfish, but we're encouraging the catch of catfish, which include the blue catfish, invasive, and snakeheads, and also perch.
Oh, wow.
So there's different ways you can do it. Thanks, Sean. There's different ways you can approach it. I mean, literally somebody could go bass fishing, snakehead fishing in a shallow water area, catch a couple fish, put them on their stringer. Heck, 3 snakehead could beat 3 rockfish, could beat 3 blue catfish.
Oh,
that's
very,
cool.
very competitive.
Right? So it's a 3-fish stinger, 3-fish stringer, all focused, I think, Bay Bridge and north. But it's October 1st, and we're looking for volunteers. We want you to sign up now, even if you can't make it. We're trying to really drive participation because it's all about giving back. We're going to have a brand new fishing tackle kids youth trailer there that in the near future will be available for anybody to borrow as long as you treat it right. And again, because of our industry, the fishing tackle industry, we're getting donations of this tackle. So we're going to say to kids, hey, you just caught your first fish? Do you have a fishing rod at home? No? Well, here you go. Not only here's your fishing rod, go hop in that trailer and we're going to build it out so it's a fishing tackle shop experience. Because who didn't love going to a tackle shop for the first time? I still love it as an adult. And that's the experience I want Baltimore City kids and anybody that comes to the area to experience, because it's been so memorable in my life. And it's those little sparks that lead to the future generations taking care of this area. And the tournament's based at Nick's Fish House, right on Hanover Street, southern end of the city, really accessible, right off 95. And Nick's Fish House is going to do a great buffet. We have live bands. We'll have a raffle, a big party under the tent. We have a mechanical shark for people to ride, and have fun. And again, ChesapeakeFishingOpen.com, and we couldn't do it without our hosts. The folks that are working to redevelop Port Covington and make it a beautiful space. They're thinking about the waterfront there, and I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, that some of our reef ball building and habitat work will be implemented into that in Baltimore, because spot burn, there's some great fishing right there too. And I mean, I guarantee you, this tournament could be won from shore. So if you're fishing anywhere from Nick's Fish House to Fort McHenry, there's some great fishing right in that region. And that's where these kids are going to be on that head boat. So bottom line is there's 3 ways to participate. You can sign up right now on that website, ChesapeakeFishingOpen.com.
Let me put that up real quick so we
I
can make
love
sure
it.
people.
Last year's winner,
ChesapeakeOpen.com.
last year's winner made got $5,800 for a $75 entry.
Nice.
So that is a cash tournament. It's not CCA driven, but it does benefit our youth fishing. ChesapeakeFishingOpen.com.
Oh,
Yep. But it benefits youth fishing. I mean, everything we receive, we give back. And Maryland Waterways Foundation is doing the same. They educate so many people on how to be a responsible, resident, how to be a good neighbor, how to take care of your trash, clean up areas that others have left in disarray. So anyway, it's great stuff. And Under Armour, great friends. They're going to be out there helping out as well. So anyway, get involved. Don't miss it.
So important, so diverse, such a unique tournament. I grew up inner city, and I was telling Grant the other day, how my life would have changed if I would have been exposed to some of the things that you're doing for children when I probably would have avoided a lot of trouble.
Yep.
But you're changing lives. It's just not you're putting a rod in someone's hand and saying, now you know how to fish. You don't know what kind of home life these children have and where they're coming from. And now you just gave them a glimpse of hope.
Yep.
So to me, it's bigger than a tournament. You're changing people's lives and not just children. I mean, changing a community is the epitome of things that we strive for, at least the Fishing Channel, I know some others out there, by being able to fish and what we're exposed to and how we can speak out is really what we're striving for. It's not just about big fish.
it's 2 fish.
I'm sorry, I'm going to cry.
Two
here.
fish
Oh,
pounds in
yeah.
one night. She's on
That's exactly
fire.
what it's like.
I
And
want to join the CCA. Is there like a job opening?
You're already on it in the season.
believe it or not, I'm working towards that. So don't I don't want to count the chickens
my
yet.
goodness.
And I'll tell you, I mean, I live in the city, and Tochterman's Tackle to me is the complete embodiment of exactly what fishing is. And there's lots of places like that, right?
Right on.
But you look at what Tony and Dee do, working their butts off just to provide. And I love going
Been there forever, right?
Well, for 106 years.
Yeah.
And I go in that store as much as I can, which isn't enough. And it gives you that feeling. And I know that my maternal, oh
Great-grandfather.
my great grandfather on my dad's side. I know that he was pretty much the fishing genes. He would go. He was a painting contractor and would fish the Magathie a lot. And he would do that when it would rain because you couldn't paint in the rain. Anyway, and I know that he would shop in Tochterman's. He would shop in Clyde Sports Center or Sports Shop. And when I go in these places, I feel that. And if you don't feel it talking to Tony Tochterman or stopping in there to see the great people that work there, but then looking around and seeing everybody else. And it reminds me that fishing is 100% a cross section of our community in every way, shape, or form. And so if we're not managing the resource for that, we're failing. And that goes right back to social media. If you think your way of fishing is better than somebody else's, then you're missing the point. You're actually discouraging what you should be supporting.
Yeah. I mean, Legend Tochterman's is a pillar in that community. Legend has it that they their initial fishing reports were for Megalodon, and they sold Jesus his first fishing rod.
Don't tell my son that because he'd be obsessed. He wants a Megalodon bad. He's 4 years old. Dinosaurs and sharks. Dee Tochterman gave my son Jack his first fishing rod, one of his little ice fishing rods, when he was probably about 3 months old, and it's still up in his room. I saw it tonight when I put him to bed. So it's good stuff, man. It's what it's all about, and it's why thank you all for the Fishing Channel and doing what you're doing. Your passion shows, and I love what you're doing to connect to your fishing reports are fantastic. And while I may not get on the water as much as I wish I could, I love listening to them, so I know what's happening and what folks are experiencing.
Well,
that means a lot.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, we have for sure broken our record, but it was.
We lost our audience now too. Everyone went to sleep.
Oh, we still got 10 people on, which I'm grateful for every last one of the people that came on and listened tonight. It was an hour and a half, really well spent.
It was for sure.
David Sikorski, we really appreciate all the work that you do. If we don't have time to thank you on a daily basis, please know that that does not mean that we're not appreciative.
Seriously.
every moment that we're on the bay. And
Honestly, we're just not saying this. I'm from New York. I don't say things just to make people happy. But I agree.
I'm from Georgia. We
I
do,
agree.
but this is
Very
real.
Very true. No, I appreciate that. And again, I when I say it that I couldn't do this without our members, without the support of our community, it's not. I mean it. I mean it to my core, and I'm a very lucky guy, and I hope I continue to be able to make positive impacts because of everyone around me and all of us together.
Right on.
D-Train one, we should give him something just for
We
that.
appreciate D-Train. Really
D-Train gets a hat.
David,
Look at
that's awesome.
So what's going to happen to the hat winners is they're going to go to TideOutfitters.com, which I'm not going to go into a long story, but a couple of members got together to create an online store to benefit CCA.
Oh.
I mean, think of that. And they're giving a percentage of profits back. Brands you'll understand, you'll see when you go. And they did that to support our work because they care so much and we're looking for a way they could provide.
That's
so these hats are going to be shipped out because they were donated by Under Armour, Baltimore-based company. And then our friends out there at Tide Outfitters are going to ship them out to folks. So I'm happy to give one away. And Phil, you get one too.
Phil Green, he's a big
the list is growing here.
Phil's one of the volunteers on the Rec Data Committee. He put in those hours yesterday because he's a passionate angler, and glad to have you involved, Phil.
He is, man. He's a big follower of our show. I just want to say about David Hall. He's D-Train.
D-Train.
This guy
Oh.
gives us thumbs up on every post we have. He watches almost all of our shows, and he asks
Serious question.
when he asks a question, I'm always like, dang, man, that is going to be question of the night. And somehow,
what happened tonight?
every single time, David asks this question where I'm like, woo, David brought his A game tonight. And he doesn't win. He hasn't won once.
Wow.
And tonight, all he has to say is the fishing channel is the best. And he gets a hat, well deserved.
We Davids have to stick together, man.
D-Train is the man. I love this guy. D-Train, sports the shirt.
Yes.
He's awesome. Sikorski, thank you so much. Everyone for logging in, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Get involved, ccamd.org, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Get involved. Any last words, Sikorski?
Out there, have some fun, go fishing, and let it be your escape from everything else that's pressuring you in life, because we all need that. Let me continue to fight the battles in the policy world and come out and have some fun with us.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna make me cry again. Well, all I have to say is fish on, everyone. Have an amazing night. What's today? Tuesday, an amazing week.
Still got plenty of it left.
Yes.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Got off in town, resident on 70 Road. Got a nice wife and kids, y'all right inside the grove. You know I like Mr. Clark. Yeah, I should know he is my